Arcola, Saskatchewan, likely not your first thought when reflecting on World War I. When one thinks of the Great War, they likely envision places like Passchendaele, Ypres, and the Somme, towns immortalized in Hollywood and history. While oceans away from any warfare, and not much of a military town now, that doesn't make the heritage town's contribution any less significant. In fact, Arcola was a key player in both World Wars. To learn more about Arcola's role in the First World War, one must not look any further than the local museum. The Arcola Museum is everything one might expect it to be. Like every other small-town display, it houses a collection of one-of-a-kind artifacts, providing a glimpse into the town's formative years and what life was like for the early settlers. Old garments, a steam car, an iron lung, and various portraits and paper items are among the mementos showcased at the museum. Nestled in a back corner, under a shroud of dust, is a key piece of Arcola's military history, a photograph of the 46th Battalion, Canadian Expeditionary Force. Formed over the winter of 1914 and 1915, the 46th Battalion was recruited under the command of Herbert Snell, a militia officer from Moose Jaw. While headquartered in Moose Jaw, the battalion recruited in Regina, Weyburn, Estevan, and Arcola. The battalion sailed for England November 1, 1915. The photograph from the Arcola Museum was taken at Camp Sewell in Manitoba during their training. It was customary at the time to take a battalion portrait before shipping overseas. Forever enshrined behind this broken glass are the faces of many of the Arcola and district men who enlisted for king and country. To dig deeper into Arcola's contribution, I caught up with local historian Adrian Payton.
Well, in my research when I was going through the town minutes, I found that both during the First World War and the Second World War, they rented the Arcola Town Hall and the Opera House. The upper floor was the Opera House, and they rented the entire floor for a recruitment center. It was a fairly large town at that time, with expectations to be larger, which it became for a while. And it was also very British-oriented, mainly from Scottish ancestry. They would be very patriotic for the British Empire. Also, they recruited the men, but there was a good percentage of them. All the local ones, or not all local, but fairly local, lived in the town prior to the war. I don't know for how long, but before they were shipped overseas, they lived billeted in houses in Arcola.
One of those men who shipped overseas was John Robert Campbell. A few miles down the road from Arcola, his uniform is on display at the Kisbey Museum. We know it's a Canadian-made tunic because of the 7 buttons as well as the standing collar, unique to the Canadian Expeditionary Force. We know it was a 46th Battalion tunic because of the collar badges you see here. It's in amazing condition given its age, over 100 years old, and even more amazing because I found tobacco in this pocket, which the moths have let alone for a century. Well, when I pulled his service file from Library and Archives Canada, I found out that he did in fact serve with the 46th Battalion. He served with them at Camp Sewell, went overseas with them. He was wounded on the Somme on October 8, 1916 by a shrapnel wound to his upper right arm, causing a fracture. Well, he would have went through a series of medical hospitals on the front, then back to England, eventually back to Winnipeg to convalesce, and he got there in 1917. Campbell's wound may have ended his war, but it didn't end his life. Living what we can only assume is a full life, married with children and grandchildren, he lived to the age of 73, dying in 1966, interred here in the Stoughton Cemetery. A proud veteran all of his life, as evidenced here by his military headstone, laid to rest by his son who followed in his footsteps and joined the military as well. Thank you for your service, gentlemen. You give your toughest fight to your best soldiers. The 46th Battalion fought in every major victory for the Canadian Expeditionary Force, but the toll was great. They suffered a casualty rate of 91.5% and earned the nickname the Suicide Battalion. At the end of the war, the 46th Battalion had lost 1,433 men, while 3,484 were wounded. 21 Arcola district men were killed in action and are honored here on the cenotaph. Let's have a closer look. Of these men, B. Hooper, B. Kitchen, W. Meikle, W. J. Mearison, and P. Winspear. Walked into a recruiting office right here in Arcola and signed up to serve with the 46th Battalion. They wrote a check to Canadians that said, up to and including my life, a debt that has been paid in full.